One of the first things that I want to do is I want to identify what is my B in both of these, the beginning, and what is my rate of change. So if I am looking at this one for Valerie, her weight begins at what weight? What did you say, Ramiro? How much does hers begin at?
I don't know, that's why.
So W equals 225 minus 25T. And it says that this is a function of her weight loss where her weight in pounds and time is W weeks. So which one do you think is her beginning? Like here, it's pretty easy to see 247, that this person weighs 247 at the beginning. What is this equation telling us the beginning is, Martin? What is the beginning weight? Looking at that equation, W equals, so we're going to have 235. So when we go to answer for the beginning weight in number 5, that is the B of each of these. In this one, how much weight is this person losing a week? If we're looking at Valerie, she's losing, what would you say, Vanessa? Or Janessa, sorry. She's losing 2.5 pounds per week. And if we look over here, we're looking at this one, Kira, what's happening to our change in weight for this person in number 8? We want to think of it as change in Y over change in X. So how is the weight changing? You want to go to 247 from 243. Which ones do you want to use? So she lost 4 pounds over what period of time, though? Over 2 weeks. So here she's losing 2 pounds, so minus 2 pounds per week. Okay? So that should help us to answer both questions, right? Okay? As you turn and look at part C and part D on the next page, please turn and look at part C and D. You will notice up here that my hints that I gave in the last class was that for each one of these, it is going to be so much easier if you find what is your beginning point and what is your slope each time we are looking at the problem. So if I always think, what is my beginning or my y-intercept, same when I look at part D, what is my beginning point? If I can tell what that is, it's much easier to write an equation. And then if I look at what is my rate of change, sometimes it's given in the story situation, sometimes you have to calculate that. But as you are looking at all of these situations, this is what you are going to need to find. So questions on either part C or D as you are looking at your homework. Proficiency scales. If you can look through these proficiency scales that are on that very back page of your notes, you should be able to do most of those. And if you can, you'll probably do okay on the test. So, first standard up here. Corey, would you read that top one on that blue poster?
I can determine if a relation is a function.
So, today the question on the quiz is not this one, but people got them confused. So the test is Wednesday, tomorrow. There are 17 questions. It's worth 56 points. So the first standard is I can determine if a relation is a function. The key part of that definition, so we're in your notes, each input has one output. Now we talked about the vertical line test for this. There's something right there. So we talked about the vertical line test. That's one way to check it if a graph is a function. The 7 questions worth 15 points. I'm going to give you 3 different graphs and I'm going to say, is it a function? Does each input have one output? Give something to write with? Yeah. So we're writing this on that page. Yep, right there where it says what's on the test. I'm going to give you x, y's, and I'm going to say, is it a function? So you're going to look at a list of x, y points. And then I'm going to give you a graph. I'm going to look at you to, for you to make a table possibly with that and tell me if it is a function or not. The second standard that is up on the poster as you are looking, it says, I can tell a story for and graph the story. So when you are looking at that, kind of like in F8, where you are looking at those stories, I'm going to give you a situation and I'm going to ask you to plot that. What does it look like for a graph? What is it telling you about the starting point? What is it telling you about the rate of change? There are 2 questions worth 12 points. The third one on the poster up here, which is a little easier to read, I can determine if a function is linear or not. The question on the quiz today is this question, not the first one. So people are confused. Function, one input for an output. Each input has one output. Linear is different. When I'm trying to determine if something is linear, what I am going to be taking a look at is using a pattern. I'm going to ask you possibly to make a table. I'm going to give you 5 questions. So it's going to be 14 points. Most of them are worth 2 points each, and it's pretty much, it might be like, if we are looking at it, it might be worth 3 or 4 points. You got to do the explanation of why. So I might give you a pattern, ask you to make a table. I'm going to ask you to look at a graph. And I'm going to say, is it linear? What are you looking for in a graph? If it's linear, you're looking, does it make a straight line? I'm going to give you a table, so I may have an XY table. If we look at an XY table, what do we have to determine if it's going to be linear? Constant addition of the same thing. So when you did activity 7 that we turned in, there were 2 linears. There were 2 that had constant addition. The other 3 were nonlinear when you were looking at those. When I look at the equation, someone said in the last class, that's when the equation is of the form y equals mx plus b. I agree, that is the case. It might also be that all the variables are to the first power. So as you're working on your review, those are going to kind of be some key things as we look at those. The last standard that is on the poster, I can compare properties of 2 different functions. This is pretty much your F8 worksheet, where I give you a table, a graph, a situation, and an equation, and ask you to tell me some information about it. So you're going to look at all of those 3 to 4 different things, and you're going to try and determine and compare, oh, which one has the greatest rate of change or slope? Or I might ask which one has the smallest. So today when you're doing that F9, you see those questions of which one has the greatest slope, which one has the smallest slope. That's where we are looking at. We're going to look at your y-intercept. So the starting point. Sometimes it might be in a situation like when we read in F8. Other times it might be a graph. Other times it might be an equation. So again, which one's the biggest, which one's the smallest, explain how you know. So what I saw in quite a few people's on that F8, I saw people just write down the sentence or the table. Make sure you give a reason why. I know that those are the answers that are in the back. Make sure you give a reason with yours as you are looking at that. And as we look at that last part, then you're going to be asked to write a statement and compare. What's alike in these 2 things? What is not alike? So when we do those comparisons, it's going to be something like, this is what is, I noticed that they have the same slope. So on the top, number 1 of F9, the domain is your x's or your inputs. So anytime you have a domain, that is your input value. Okay, that is your x. Your range is your y. So it asks you to list the number 1. It's only the one question that asks you to list your domain and range. All the rest of these are asking you if it's a function and to explain. So the domain, the first domain would be what number? 3. Then we'd have what? -10. Well, then we have 3 again. Do we write it again? No. Our last domain that we have is 5. Now we actually have 4 different ranges, so you should write all of those ranges down. Then you are looking at questions 2 through 13. 14, and it's asking you if it's a function. This is how the first part of the test looked. So I'm going to give you X, Y pairs. I'm going to give you graphs. I'm going to give you some lines, and I'm going to ask you, is it a function? Each input X has to have an output. So when you're answering those questions, then here, when you get to, if you turn and look at question 14 and 15, as you look at 14 and 15, it's asking you to compare in these two, which one has the greatest rate of change or slope? Which one has, in this case, the greater initial value, y-intercept? So again, every time you're looking at these, if you can always think, what's the M, what is the B? What is the M, what is the B? It's going to make it so much easier to answer those questions if you do it in both the graphs and the equations and your tables. As you turn to that next page, looking at 16, again, it's asking you for the greater slope or unit rate or greater y-intercept. Then this is what our quiz is on today, and it's asking you, is it linear or non-linear? Linear is when we look at a graph, we just said in the notes, makes a straight line. Table is constant addition, and equation is of the form y equals mx plus b, or to the first power. You should have, if you have not finished through this last part, 24 through 29, where you're doing those stories.